All right. So can you hear me well?
All right. So can you hear me well?
Oh, I can hear myself. You gotta plug in some
Oh, I
headphones or
can hear
something so I don't
myself.
get the echo.
You gotta plug in some headphones or something so I don't get the echo.
Let me move to another side over here, maybe. It's a bit better. It's echoing quite bad, to be honest. I can hear you well, yeah. Well, that's what I did.
Okay, wait. I just went to the other room. What'd you do?
What'd you do?
I plugged in my earphones, my Bluetooth earphones.
Well, how come I still hear you?
Well, how come I still hear you?
Why do we have this echo going on?
Alright, let me try them off. We'll see whether that's going to resolve the issue.
Okay, wait. I just went to the other room. What'd you do?
Are you able to hear me now, AJ? I plugged in my earphones, my Bluetooth earphones.
Well, how come I still hear you?
Oh gosh, it's replaying.
Why do we have this echo going on?
Alright, let me try them off.
Oh,
Whether that's going to resolve the issue.
I'm really. Do you have?
We are about 30 seconds behind.
Oh gosh. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18. Do you have headphones in? Because we're still getting massive echo.
Really? Do you have
We are about 30 seconds behind.
oh gosh. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 18. Do you have headphones in? Because we're still getting massive echo.
AJ, let me try to call you back.
Okay. You gotta put some headphones in. You gotta turn off your computer
Give me
speakers.
a sec. Can you hang up, please?
Hello.
Hey AJ, can you hear me better now?
Yeah, you sound great.
So I have no headphones on, just to let you know. I was in the office. I don't know whether it's a bad network connection there or what is it related to. So I might be just without them.
Okay. Well, now there's no terrible echo.
Okay, well then I'm gonna need to get my MacBook cable in this room instead.
Okay, cool. Well, you take a second to do that.
Okay. The screen.
Well, that's because I had it muted, so I'm turning it back on for a second.
Oh, okay, gotcha.
Because I was doing the audio test, and normally during this part it's just silent.
Oh, okay, gotcha.
But yeah, let me know. You should hear it in about 10 seconds.
Okay.
And Caspers, go ahead and talk again.
Yes, can hear you loud and clear.
All right. So I'm just going to tell us if we can all hear each other, and then we'll get started. I'm going to go ahead and mute this again. But say something one more time.
Yes, can you hear me at this stage? Is everything fine?
Well, hello, and welcome back. And actually, let me get the right thing on the screen. I'm AJ O'Neill, and what we're working on today, this is Beyond Code Live, what we're working on today is we're going to add a type ahead to a field here, and we're just going to do them two. And then on the line, I've got Caspers, who is joining in live from London. You can say hello if you want.
Hello, everybody.
And, I can get rid of this timer now because we are actually starting. But anyway, so we're just kind of going to go through this. And as you see things, Caspers, feel free to ask questions. I know that you are just starting out on your learning journey, so you're not going to really understand the JavaScript syntax. You're probably seeing some of the HTML syntax, but feel free to just ask any question that comes to your mind. It's totally fine. And I will get started on this in just a second, I guess. So Cameron's looking good. Everything's looking good. We tweeted out all that. So anyway, yeah, for those of you watching, if at any point you find this to be useful or helpful, go ahead and give it a big fat thumbs up. And if you decide you want to subscribe because you want more stuff like this, you can check down in the doobly-doo for the links and all that. Okay. So what we've got here, Caspers, just to do a quick recap, is I've been working on a blog system. So you can kind of see here's the table of stuff that I've been working on. These are all different drafts. And as I click on these buttons, you'll probably see this in about 10 seconds, I guess. You can see that down below there's a content area. So down there, like that, there's a content area, and it is changing as I am clicking load drafts, and everything is automatically saving. So if I go blah, 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 and I load something else and I come back to that, it's automatically saved basically on every keystroke locally into the browser. So it's not being saved on a server. It's just being saved in the browser, just like a local file, but specific to the demo page I'm working on. And one of the things that you got to do when you set this up is say what GitHub URL the blog goes to, and then the branch and what type of blog system it's using, and whether it's on GitHub or Git or whatever. So what I want to do is provide a type ahead right here where it says repo, so that if you have more than one blog like I do, it will autofill and let you select more than one thing. So that's what I'm going to be working on. Any questions on like the idea of what I'm trying to do? I mean, I'm guessing you've seen web pages before. You've seen forms in a web page before. You've seen it gives you drop down options, that sort of thing. But any questions?
No.
Okay, cool. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm just going to open up the index.html is where I got this stuff. And I'm going to go down to where there is the repo here. And here is the input where it has this placeholder text, which is what shows up gray right here. And what I want to do is make it so that basically when you double click on it, it shows you some options. So what I'm going to do then, I actually need to go look this up. Basically, no matter how many years of experience you have, you still spend the most of your day just looking stuff up and then copying and pasting. So I need HTML. It's called data list. It's a combo box or a type ahead, but they call it data list for whatever reason. And let's see, what do I need to do? List equals. Okay, so I'm going to do input and then list equals. And I'm just going to paste this junk here. One thing that's really weird, almost all the tutorials online are bad. Almost none of them are written by experts. And I find this to be very, very sad. Or they're written by quote unquote experts who are not very pragmatic. So there's a lot of just garbage, I don't know how else to say it, in the tutorial community, and people either make tutorials way too technical or they make them oversimplified and to the point of stupidity. And one thing that's really weird that I think everybody that's a beginner should know about HTML forms is that the label element is supposed to encompass the input. So you'll see, this is just an aside to what we're just looking at, but look, you notice here they have this label and then it says for, and then they have an input. This is nonsense. Labels should actually go around the input. So it should look like this. And then you don't have to do silly things like have a for or an ID, because instead of having the label off in a random place, you have the label directly connected to the input. And then it also means that when you click on something in the form itself will become active. So you notice I'm clicking on the words, or I can click on the form. Yeah, and you can see right here, here's the type ahead. This is what we're doing. But anyway, that's just a little note. Have you done much with HTML yet? I know you.
No, I haven't.
Well, it's basically arbitrary words between opening and closing brackets, and then that same whatever it is closed somewhere else. So if you open a label, you close it somewhere else. If you open an input, you close it somewhere else. Well, actually, inputs just get closed on their own. So open doesn't begin with a slash, and close does begin with a slash. And again, I know that this is kind of drinking from the fire hose, and I'm already in the middle of this project and all that, but feel free to ask questions. So I'm going to call this list repos, and I'm going to prefix it with minus for a very particular reason, which I'll go into in just a minute. But whenever I use an ID, I always prefix it with a minus, and often minus.js or minus.js, or what I mean, hyphen, whatever. Anyway, this is to prevent a bug from happening that browsers do, which I'll demonstrate in just a second. But I'm going to go ahead and put in here a couple of values that I'll try to actually use real values here. And we want, I don't know if we want autocomplete on or off, but I think we want it off. I'm going to try with it off, I'm going to try with it on, and we'll see what happens. But I'm going to say, these are just URLs that I'm putting in, Beyond Code Bootcamp /bliss. No, is that what I want? That's not really what I want, but I want beyondcodebootcamp.com. That's what I want. So this is one of the options that this is an actual project that I have. And then we're going to put another one here. Get.coolage86.com, coolage86, and blog.coolage86.com. And then I'll get rid of that stuff. And then I'll put, let's see, we got rootprojects.org. And then I'll just leave it at that. There's one other one that I have, but I'll input it. therootcompany.com, the more proper way once I get this going. Anyway, so the data list ID needs to match the list. There might be a way to associate a data list and an input. Like maybe you can do something like this. I don't actually know, which would be awesome if you could just do that and not have to deal with IDs. But I will go ahead and refresh this page here, which is where this is living. And then now, let's see what happens. If all goes well, yeah. So now what this should be doing is it's giving me a list of options to choose from. And if I pick one, it will select it. And if I just type some letters that are similar to one of them that matches, then it is reducing the size of it. So this is, for all intents and purposes, a true blue combo box. I can type in something completely arbitrary, or I can choose from the list that's being presented, and there we have it. So there's no need to use, if you were to search how to do this, if you knew that this was a combo box or a typeahead and you were to search, how do I do this? You would come across dozens and hundreds of tutorials that tell you really, really complex ways to go about it, when all that you need to do is just set a data list to an input with list equals. And it doesn't need JavaScript, it doesn't need CSS, it doesn't need components, it doesn't need React. It's built into the web browser. It works as you can see here. So I'm going to show the bad thing that happens now whenever you use an ID in HTML. So now I'm in JavaScript. If I go to Window, Repos, there is an object that's created that exists everywhere throughout any of the JavaScript in my code that is now called -repos. And this is the reason that I put a dash. Because let's say that I was going to have, let's say that I was going to call this counter instead. So I'm just going to do this real quick. If I were to call anything, any HTML, if you do ID equals, if you do not put a minus, if you just do ID equals, this terrible, terrible thing happens where that object is now accessible anywhere in your JavaScript. So let's say I had something that said if counter, then let's say console.log has counter already. That's not a good name for what this is. And then I said else console.log need to create counter. Since I have not defined a counter, what we would expect and hope is that we would see need to create counter. But if I hit enter, well, whoops, I need to refresh the page. If I hit enter, we see has counter already. But nowhere in my program did I define that there's a counter. Yet there is one. And this is why anytime I use an ID, I try to avoid IDs wherever possible. And wherever I have to use an ID, I always put a minus in front of it. That way it doesn't cause bugs in my code where, you might think, oh, a good ID for this would be name. Well, guess what? You're going to have a variable somewhere in your code that's called name. Or maybe you think, oh, this is person, or this is contact, or you can think of, 1,000 different common variable names that you might call something. And if you happen to use an ID by that, then you're going to end up with bugs in your code where you accidentally forget to, you misspell something. It should be contacts and you spell it contact or something like that. And instead of throwing an error and stopping the program and saying, hey, there was a problem here, it'll just chug along and do something unexpected. Do you get that? Does that make sense at all, or is that too advanced?
It is a bit too advanced, to be honest, but I'm trying to understand, by looking at the code,
Well, like normally, for example, you do var counter equals some object count 1, you can do something like that, and now I've defined a counter. Now my program has a counter in it. So I would expect that if I ran this, that now,
Okay.
it should say already has counter. But if I didn't define it, I'm going to refresh, I'm starting with a fresh program, my program is blank, and the very first thing I do in my program is say, if there's a counter, it definitely shouldn't have a counter. Well, now it doesn't because I changed this ID back. Anyway, so the HTML, the input is this thing. This thing with the blue around it, that's an input. And then the data list is this thing. And basically the browser knows how to display it. This is an input. This is input. This is actually a select input. So you see it's a little bit different, where this one I can freeform type whatever I want and it'll just match stuff auto-magically. This one, this one is pre-populated and I can only choose from a defined list. So that's what inputs and options and selects and stuff like that are. It's just you type it in and it displays on a page. Anyway, I'm going to go off to some JavaScript, but again, like ask questions, even dumb questions. Stop me. Like this is all just for fun and giggles here. So, I mean, there is a task that I'm trying to accomplish, but ask me, why does this look like that? Why does that look like that? What did you do there? So I'm going to, the next thing that I want to do is this group of information is likely to be repeated because between the different blogs, as I load these different drafts, I don't need to redefine the entire bit of this information for every single one of these. I really just need to define it probably just in most cases, like I need to define it 4 different times, but in most cases people only need to define it once. And so it makes sense that if somebody just fills it in, then it should automatically be filled in the next time. And they shouldn't have to adjust this information. And if they're using one post that goes to one website and another post that goes to another website, like I will be doing, then it should memorize what each one is, but it should be very easy to just select when I do a new post to select the next one and get the information related to it. So that's what I'm going to be building out right now. So on
AJ, if for example you had 100 options in a drop-down box of repo, by typing in let's say the first 3 letters, would it find what you were looking for or no?
Yeah. So like here, if I click in this, you can see it shows a bunch of options. And if I type root, it narrows it down to the only ones that match that. Now, if I just type get, it doesn't narrow it down at all. If I do get h, it narrows it down. If I do get dot, it narrows it down. So yeah, okay. It narrows it down to whatever's matching.
Mm-hmm. All right, that's understood.
And then what I need to do here is right now I have this on change post serialized. So basically it's going to save the blog post to the database. And what I actually need to do is make this blog.serialize, I guess. And this is a function that I wrote. You're going to see this in just a second. So I wrote an object called blog and a function called serialize. An event is just something that's kind of part of HTML-ish. So I can say when this changes, and actually we could do, I think on change is appropriate. So when this changes, then I want to run a function. So I'll show you this really simply. I'll just make a function that calls an alert. So I'm going to go up to the top here. We're going to have blog. And I have these things, and then the model. So you see I've got post, and then post model, and blog, and then blog model. That's just a way for me to organize my functions. Any of the functions that are going to be interacting with the HTML, I call them the simple name. And then anything that just interacts with the data but doesn't interact with the HTML is called with model. And that's just something I'm doing for funsies. So I'm going to create a function that is called serialize. And serialize is often used to mean save out to a text format or put out to a text format. So that's not quite the right name for what I'm doing here because I'm actually saving it to the database. Maybe I should have called it save instead. But serialize and deserialize basically mean like if I'm going to deserialize it, I'm going to take it from the text database form and I'm going to put it into the HTML form. And if I'm going to serialize it, I'm going to read in from the HTML form, and then I'm going to save it or transform it into a text form. So this is one of those things of experts calling things by bad names. I should call it something different, but I'm going to go with it for now. Anyway, EV, I can call this whatever I want. So on the outside, what this looked like was blog.serialize event. Well, once it comes on the inside, it doesn't matter what somebody called it on the outside. When it comes on the inside, it gets to be whatever I want it to be named. So I could call it A or EV or event or whatever. I'm just going to call it EV. And this is its new name. So whatever information was contained in the event, this is its new name. Now, event is a browser thing. So it's not part of JavaScript. But what happens when you click on something, so say I click right here, it actually fires a click event. And the click event may or may not get handled. In this case, it doesn't get handled. Well, it does kind of get handled. There's some default stuff built in. And you can see that it changes focus. It gets this blue thing around it. But there's nothing in my code. That's just the default, the way the browser behaves. There's nothing in my code that's doing anything when I click in this. But if I were to do an on click, then I could catch that event somewhere, because what happens is the click starts here, and if nothing catches it on this input, then it'll go up to the label. And if nothing catches it on the label, actually the label will defer it to the input, which is one of the nice things about a label. But if it doesn't get caught on the label, it'll try to get caught by the field set. And if it doesn't get caught by the field set, it'll try to get caught by the form. And if it doesn't get caught by the form, it'll try to get caught by the section container. And if it doesn't get caught by the section container, it'll try to get caught by the main area. And then if it doesn't get caught there, it'll go up to the document, which is the very, very place where this entire document starts, is called document. And if it doesn't get caught there, it'll bubble up all the way to the window. And so an event, you can catch an event anywhere. And so what I'm doing here by saying ev.stopPropagation is I'm saying, once you handle the event where I'm clicking here, then I want you to stop passing that event forward. Because I could also do it the other way. If I don't stop propagation, then it could click all the way up and it could get caught. You could actually handle the click multiple times. So I could handle the click once on the input, and then I could handle it on the form, and we could have an alert that says, oh, click caught on the input, and then another one that says click caught on the form, and so on and so forth. Does that make sense? It's almost like a ripple.
Yeah.
And then prevent default. A lot of things have a default action, such as they will, if you can submit a form and it causes the web page to reload, or you can click a link. And when you click a link, it causes it to go to a different web page. If you do prevent default, then it won't do that default behavior.
Mm-hmm.
And then here, I'm just going to call window.alert. And a window is not part of JavaScript. It's part of the browser. So when you load a browser, the browser is a program that is running, and JavaScript gives you a way to access parts of the browser and to be able to tell them to do things. So the browser has an alert box, and I'm going to say, yoo-hoo, that tickles. And so now if I go over here and I refresh so that we get the new version of the program, and I click here, let's see. Oh no, it was on change. It wasn't on click. You say, woohoo, that tickles, right? So this is not something that I did any code for other than I put the text in there. This is just part of the browser. The browser has a thing called an alert. This is what the browser alert looks like. So if I change it again, yoo-hoo, that tickles. So does that make sense? Any questions?
No.
Okay. So there's another thing that I want to do. I can specify the type of this. That's interesting. It is specified. I might have done it wrong. Maybe it's not called URL. Input type, maybe it's href. Maybe that's what I need to put. Let's see. Type equals URL. Maybe this doesn't do anything anymore. Let's see. Input, type, URL. Huh. Um, Interesting. Very interesting. So what I was expecting, because this is type URL, is that it actually should not allow me to put in a value that is not a valid URL. Um, So I'm not... Let me try this real quick. So I should not be able to put in this. Ah, okay. It's registering a change event even though it's not valid. Interesting. Okay. Good to know. So some of these, when you give it a type, it restricts it and makes sure that if what you're typing in doesn't match, it'll give you an error and say, hey, this is not a URL, which is what I was expecting it to do. But it looks like it won't allow a submit event to fire, but it will allow it to get wrong information. So, oh well, I just have to deal with that. Okay. Oh, and actually, I do have the comments open if anybody else is watching. Oh, yeah. I might mispronounce your name. Akshet. You are welcome for the tip about the ID naming. That is something so few people know. I wish more people knew. But I've got the comments open on both Twitch and YouTube. So if you want to have a comment or make a comment or ask a question, I will. When I look right here, this is when I'm looking at the comments. So I'll try to remember to do that because I've been talking with Caspers and I've not been looking at the comments. Anyway, so what I want to be able to do is see if all of these bits of the form have a value. And it looks like, I think they always will by default have some value. This one I could leave unselected, I suppose. I might just switch this one to be Hugo rather than calling it Eon, because Hugo is a blog system. It's one of the more popular blog systems that's actually pretty good. And you can write your blog in Markdown, so you write it like this, and then it will output it. So just to give you an example of a Hugo blog, this right here is a Hugo blog. So I wrote all of these in Markdown, and then the theme is what makes it look pretty. Hugo I don't know what the default theme is in Hugo or if it even has one, but the reason that it looks pretty decent is because of the theme that's Eon. But most of the characteristics, like having a date, having an author name, having a title, those are all things that are common to Hugo itself, not necessarily part of the theme. And so I think what I'm going to do is rename this from Eon to Hugo, because the system's more important than the theme. Have that be the default selected. Have GitHub will be the default selected. Branch, the default will be main, but we'll put a typeahead here to allow some other stuff, actually. That's one thing that I wanted to do as well. So before I even go any further on this, I'm going to go back. I'm going to go into the typeahead area where I've got main, and we're going to do another data list. So let me just grab this, and then I'm going to say, hey, this should have, we'll call this one branches. There we go. And then here we'll have main. Main master and GitHub pages are the things that people are most likely going to be using if they're using one of the common blog systems. So Caspers, I don't know, have you used Git much at all? I don't think you really have yet.
It's just very, very basic. Very basic. It's just how to post something, and that's about it.
So you've used GitHub, but not Git, I think.
Yeah, GitHub. Yeah, that's correct.
Yeah, GitHub and GitHub is a website. Git is an actual technology that GitHub uses. So I don't think you've used Git yet, but have you seen main and master when you've been on GitHub? Have you seen those and noticed that yet?
No, I haven't. No.
Okay. Well, when you are on, let me just go over to. Bloop, 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 bloop. I'm going to get rid of these things. Go over Beyond Code Bootcamp.com. There we go. So here are all the files, and you'll see right here you have a list of branches, and the default branch used to be called master. Now the default branch is called main, and that's really a bunch of political nonsense, but I actually prefer the name main anyway. And then if you want to turn something into a website, if you want to turn those files into a website, you can go into settings and click on pages, and then you can select, oh, this one's private, so I can't do that. But normally there's an option that lets you select which branch do you want, and then if you're using the old style of how you would build blogs with GitHub, then you'd use the branch called GH pages, and even now you sometimes still use that. Anyway, so it's basically it's typically a branch is which copy do you want to look at. It's almost like a version, but it's like a version. Usually you merge your branches back into main or to master when you have completed work, but you use them to kind of keep a copy so that the main one still works, but you can screw stuff up in the alternate version that's the copy until you figure out what you want to do and get it right. Anyway, so let me go back here. I've got the branches there now. So now if I refresh this page, I've got main selected by default, but if I get rid of it, there we go. And I could turn autocomplete on for this. In fact, I'm going to do that. Let me go back over here. And for this one, we're gonna say autocomplete equals on. And the reason that we're going to do that is I'm specifying here a finite list. Main, master, GH pages. And this is a good default set to have. But they may use other names, and I don't think that it's necessary to populate every possible name they might ever use. But if they happen to enter in, I use the blog branch a lot. When they go click create, the browser will save that they put blog in there. And the next time, the list will also show not only what I've put in, but it'll also show what they've put in as well if autocomplete is equal to on. Now the caveat there is that in Firefox, you can either have a static list, like what I've done here. This is a static list because it's static in the page. It's written into the page. It's not changing. You can use static lists with autocomplete equals on in Firefox, but there's some sort of bug where if you try to use a dynamic list, autocomplete has to be turned off. So you can either get a dynamic listing, including the user's input, or you can get a predefined listing. You can get a dynamic listing that you're generating, but you won't get the user's additions as well. Okay, so I'm checking out any comments. Nope. Okay, moving on. All right, do you have any more questions right now?
Not at the moment.
All right. So every event in the browser has a target. And the target, let me just do this. The target refers to the element. It might be an input, it might be a form, it might be the document, it might be the body, it might be a div. But the target refers to the element that currently is experiencing that event. So, like I said, if we were to click somewhere, first the input is experiencing the event, but then it bubbles up and the form is experiencing the event, etc., etc. So the target is where the event appears to have originated. So it'll yeah. So in this case, blog.serialize, the target is going to be the input. And what I actually want to do is I want to find the form that is, well, maybe that's not the right way to do it. Sorry, I'm doing this backwards. Closest. So closest means closest parent. This is not part of JavaScript. This is part of the browser. But I could say form equals ev.target.closest. And this is a really good pattern to use because I only happen to have one form on the page, but if you had a list of multiple things that had inputs in them, like if I had a table where each row in the table was a form that had inputs, I want to be able to select the closest parent container that matches, and I want to be able to do something with it. So in my case, I want to find the let's see, it would be the branch input, which would be, I'm going to look for, I think it's input name equals get branch. And I'm going to look for that on the form. So this $ thing, this is just a shortcut that means find, and it's something that is a common convention. So it's what it really is if I were to do ev.target.query selector, and I were to give it what I'm looking to find, I'm looking for an input that has the name get branch. That's what that would look like, but just as a shortcut, I have a function that's $, and this is a common convention. Lots of people do this. In fact, there was a framework that was built around this idea that actually inspired the idea of this called jQuery. But that's not what this is. This is just an alias for that. And I'll demonstrate this in just a second, what all this means. So I want to get the branch input. So I'm going to go ahead and show which inputs I want to get, and then I will demonstrate better what I'm talking about. So branch input, and then we want to get the blog system, which I don't remember what that was. Oh, here we go. This is what I should call these. This should be called get branch, because that's, yeah, and this should be called get host. And what's actually really common to do is to put a $ in front of these when they refer to things that are part of the browser, which is, sorry, I've used the term DOM several times now. DOM is another word that means the browser. It means document object model, or rather it's what's in the window in the browser is called DOM. So if something isn't a normal JavaScript object, if it's part of the DOM, it's very common to put a $ in front of it. This is just a convention that happened several years ago and people just kind of stuck with it. It doesn't have a really strong reason as to why that is. But it's just something that people started doing and they keep doing. All right, so I want my get branch input, my repo input, my host. In fact, I probably want to do this on all of these. Blog.
AJ, what would have happened if you wasn't to put any $ in front of them?
Nothing. It's just a name. So this is the exact same. Like I could put X in front.
Okay.
I could put B in front. It's literally a letter. The $ in JavaScript is considered a letter, just like the letter A or the letter 0 or the letter 9. It's just considered a letter. And
okay, but it should be letters only. It can't be the number, can it?
you can have a number in here. So I could do this. I could put like that. You can't start with a number.
All right.
But you can start with a $. A $. Is considered alphabetical in JavaScript. For some weird reason, it actually has to do with metaprogramming for transpilers. But that's just a historical item that I won't go into, and it would be difficult to explain. There is a real reason for it, but it's, yeah. Likewise, you can also start with underscore. Underscore is considered to be a character as well.
Oh.
But underscore is commonly used when when something is not well defined yet, and you're like, I might want to change the name of this, or I'm not really sure what I'm doing with this yet. Anyway, I'm going to call this, this is going to be blog. We'll call this blog type. I might change it to be blog type later. So this get branch, I think it's actually a select. I don't think it's an input. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to do console.log, and we're going to see the get branch.value. We'll just put out a bunch of these things real quick. Get host.value. .value is part of every DOM element, meaning an input. Well, every DOM form element has a .value, which is whatever the user had typed inside of it, which could be an empty string. It could be nothing there yet. Blog type .value. Okay. So did I get everything? We've got repo. Oh, I need to put repo there as well. Get repo. And I should probably call that get repo maybe. I should see what GitHub does. I should actually go over to GitHub and then see what they call things. Like for example, let me go back to GitHub right now. I can just right click on this and I can say inspect. And I could see, it's a little bit difficult to tell. I'm going to do Command F and see if there is an input in here. Nope. Is there a select? Huh. I don't think so. So I think they did a completely custom element here. There's nothing normal about it. But I'm interested. I'm going to go into settings and see what if we do this? What if we go to branches? Okay, what do they call this? That's obviously an input. What do they call it? Name is new name. So, okay. If there was some sort of convention that GitHub was using, I would name mine the same thing that way. Because if there's different websites that have the same name for a field, like for example email, if you typed in something in one website as email, the browser will collect that and save it. And then when you go to another website and it has the same input and the name is email, it'll auto-populate that list of previous emails that you've used. And so if you can use the same names as what a larger, bigger, more popular site is using for your inputs, then you'll get the same auto-generated inputs as what users that are using that site have been putting in, and it makes their experience a little bit nicer. So anyway, and then we've got get repo. Get repo. Okay. So I'm just going to log out this information. So let me do a refresh here. And I'm going to change this and then just hit tab, and that's going to cause the onChange event to fire. And cannot read value of null. So we've got an error. And the error is because get repo was wrong, and I see why. And I'm going to fix that, and then we're going to walk through a little bit of this selector stuff. So I'll show you what's what. Okay, so now let me do this again, and then let's go look at the console. What? What? How can it? Get repo. Oh, it's just called repo. I'm going to change the name of it. Or maybe I'm not. I have to think on that for a second. No, I'm not changing the name of it, because there's other parts in the code that depend on that being called repo right now, and if I want to change it, I need to change those parts of the code as well. So I'm just going to call it by that name right now. And then I'm going to, just to be consistent with these, until if I decide to rename those, I'm just going to call them by the same name as what their name is. And I could probably bear to do that without changing the capitalization here as well, but I'm going to leave that for now just so that we can go test this. Okay, so refresh, repo, and let's see what we get. You got to be kidding me. Get branch, name, get branch. Okay, I'm going to, oh, get branch is not a select. Sorry, I'm just batting 1,000 today, which is an American expression to say I'm doing poorly. Sarcastic expression. Because we've got baseball, and if you bat 1,000, I think it's a perfect score of hitting every ball that's thrown at you. So you say, I'm just batting 1,000 today. It's ironic, or not ironic, but sarcastic to mean I'm hitting none of the balls today. Okay. No, what is going on? Okay, blog. Was this not? Oh, that's the select. Okay. So it's kind of good to see all this stuff. Let me check over here, looking at if there's any comments. Feel free to comment. I've got comments open on both YouTube and Twitch. When I look this way, I'm looking at comments. All right, there we go. You know, and if you see something I'm doing wrong, feel free to point it out and say, hey, you made a typo. Save us all a little bit of time and headache. Okay, so I think this time, just put stuff in there. Yay! Okay, cool. So now, something went a little bit wrong because I'm getting main twice, which means that, there we go. I didn't change get host. I copied and pasted, and it had the old value. Cool. So we'll try this one more time. And what is it on about now? It is called get host, but it's a select. So that also needs to be a select. Okay. Duh. I should have... I'm like wanting to demo this, so instead of actually reading my code, I'm just ignoring it and going on, which is poor form for sure. Okay, so now we can see that we're getting all of these different values. So I want to show, if you open up your browser, the $ is so common that when you run JavaScript as a file, the $ will not be defined by default. But what the browser will do is exactly what I've done. And it will give you a $ by default. It'll give you a double $ if you want to select multiple things, or it'll give you a single $ if you want to select the first thing that matches. So if I do a single $ and I give it the string input, it says find anything where the type of it matches input and give me the first one. And so it does. And I could say, I could put some brackets here. And I could say, give me an input, give me the first input that matches, say, get host. And there's nothing, because there is no input that has the name of get host. But if I do the select, then there it goes. And if I hover over it, you can see in the DevTools here, it shows me exactly which one it is. Now this one over here is hidden, so I couldn't actually show you. I know where it is, but it's not going to show up when I hover over it, because it's right there, but it's hidden. It's meant to be information only. Actually, I should probably change that to a data attribute rather than being an input, but just as well. Anyway, so if I want to select, like I said, the closest parent, because I can select the parent, and that ends up being the label, and then I could select the parent of that, and that ends up being the field set, and then I could select the parent of that, and that ends up being the form. So I can call .parent, but also I can just say, I don't know where this thing is. I just know that it's a parent. And I guess it's cool that they called it closest. It would have been more descriptive if it said closest parent. But I'm going to say, walk upwards and give me the first form that you find. Or walk upwards and give me the first field set that you find. And what's nice about this is I can walk up to then walk down to find siblings, because there's not a good easy way to say what I'm interested in is these 4 things. And these 4 things kind of go together. But as far as finding one of them, it would be difficult. I can find children. I can do query select, and then I could find a child, but there actually are no children of select. But I don't have a good way to find a sibling to say, give me something that's either near me, forwards or backwards. And so the best way to do it is to use closest and then say, give me the closest form. And then from the form, we can use query selector and say, we can use query selector all and say, find all of the inputs that are part of this form. So everything that's an input is part of the form. or show me everything that's a selector that's part of the form. Oops, sorry, not selector, select, that's part of the form. Or give me everything that's part of the form that has a name. Doesn't matter what the name is, just needs to have a name. Or give me everything that has a name, and we can actually get kind of crazy here doing matches and stuff, but I won't do that right now. Or just give me the thing that has the name get host, regardless of whether it's a select or an input or whatever. Does that make sense at all?
Kind of does.
What questions do you have?
To be honest with you, I got lost a bit in the code.
Sure.
You're just trying to figure out a little bit. I will review it and I'll get back to you in private then.
Okay. All right. But anyway, if I mouse over these things, you can see it's selected all of these things. And you can see them highlight there. So the selector is just a way to say, find something on the page and then give me stuff about it. And the reason I'm using it here is you can use the selector from the target. So whatever it was that fired off this event, give me the thing that's the closest parent to it, that's the form, and then I'm going to go find all 4 of these things. Because I'm actually going to use this event. The way that I'm going to use this event is I'm going to say if any 4 of these things changes, check to see if it's complete. And if it's complete, what we're going to do is we're going to save it. So let me demonstrate that. I wonder if there's a way nowadays. I think there is. I think I could do this. New URL. Let's see. I'm gonna try something. So I think this has made it into JavaScript. I think this is actually part of JavaScript now. I'm not 100% sure on that. And the distinction between the browser and JavaScript is one that is really strange because the two are so closely tied together. They're used very frequently. It's almost like separating out the milk and egg component of custard. Or rather, imagine if people used milk and eggs together so commonly that people would refer to milk as egg, and they would refer to egg as egg, and they would refer to custard as egg. And so if people just called everything egg, even though they're actually different things, that's kind of what JavaScript is like. People call everything JavaScript, but there's actually a very well-defined small thing that actually is JavaScript, and none of the other stuff is, which is one of the things that makes it really confusing to learn JavaScript, because everybody just they call the browser JavaScript, they call TypeScript JavaScript, they call transpilers JavaScript, they call proposed specifications that are written on a website that relate to JavaScripty things. Basically anything that touches JavaScript in any way, people call JavaScript, and it gets confusing. And I'm sorry about that. Okay. So good news. I think that this URL object is going to serve us well here. Okay, not 100%, but close enough. This will approximately give us something that looks like a URL. So it's going to have a colon in it, because technically the colon is optional. So if you did https:// you can kind of sort of just omit the slashes. They're not strictly necessary. And in fact, I want to try this. I'm just going to go https twitter.com. Let's see if this works. Yeah, it will. So the slashes are a relic of time, and they have to do with specifying that something is a part of a path. So I'll give an example where the slashes actually do matter. and this will behave differently in different places. If I want to say go to a file, and I say go to the file foo.txt, that should mean there's a file where I am called foo.txt. Whereas if I do file ///, that should mean the upmost parent that's the furthest above me should have a file called foo.txt. But this actually doesn't work consistently. But the schemes, whether it's HTTP or HTTPS or Skype or Discord or Bitcoin or basically anything that can communicate over a network, is a scheme. And the ones that we're most familiar with are really there's tel for telephone, so I can. This is a URL, believe it or not. I could put 1-555 and 867-530. I don't know what that number actually is, but this is actually considered a scheme. So basically, any way of communication between computers is a URL, and the one that gets a lot of buzz is HTTPS. But when you make a phone call, you're using a URL. If you're clicking a phone call button on a computer, you're using a URL, so on and so forth. So anyway, it's really loose, but it's going to work well enough for us right now. So I'm going to say new URL, and this is going to throw an error if this is incorrect. So I'm going to do repo.value. This is one of the rare exceptions where a try-catch is the right thing to use. I rant a lot about how you shouldn't use try-catch because it's not the right tool for the job, pretty much ever. But if this passes, dirty don't save. I'm going to say ignore here. So a try-catch means try to do this thing, but if there is an error, then catch the error and fix the error in some way. And so what I'm going to say here is repo is equal to repo.value. Whoops, $repo.value. Try to see if this is a URL. If it's not actually a valid URL of any form, it's going to throw an error, and I'm going to catch that error, and I'm going to ignore it. We're going to say dirty is equal to true. Let's see. No, we'll say dirty is equal to false because that makes this logic easier. So if the URL is not valid, then I'm going to say that this is dirty. So dirty is just something I'm making up. Well, all of the variables are something that I make up, but I'm just going to use that to be able to check later on what should I do with this. Because if it's dirty, I shouldn't save it. If it's not valid, or I guess I could say valid. Valid is true. No, I don't want to do that. Valid and dirty are common things to use here. Anyway. So yeah, what I want to do, maybe I actually do want to go back and just call this .value, and then get rid of the dollar signs, because I don't think I need these for anything else right now. I think that would work to do this, and then maybe I do just call those names as such, and then yeah. So first I want to focus on the positive case. If this is valid, then I want to save it. So I have a save function that I already created. I think it might be a set function. Let me go check. Yeah, well, save. Okay, get and save. All right, good enough. Yep. So I'd already defined a function that is save. So I'm going to say if not dirty, we're going to save this. And what this is going to be, I think I'm just going to keep using what I've been using for the moment, but I actually do want to change this later. So I do get branch, get host, repo. And the browser has something, you know, you can save stuff to a text file. The browser has something that's kind of like saving a file called local storage. You don't actually get access to any files, but you can say, here's some information, save it by this name, and then let me get it back later. So I'll demonstrate that in a moment. Anyway, we've got repo, get branch, get host. What was the other thing that I needed? Blog. And this refers to the system of blog, such as Hugo. So some of these names I'm not 100% on being sure it's the right name yet. There we go. And then really at this point, I guess it would be fair. I could just exit out of this. I'll just leave these for now, because that's really all I need to do. If this is good, save it. If it's not good, don't save it. That's kind of, well, I guess, I'll just do this. I'm just going to do this for now. So basically I'm saying if I know that I'm going to have the information for, I also, I need this. If not get, was it get branch? Return? Yeah. So basically, if all 4 of these are filled out and they're correct, then I want to save it. Otherwise, I'm going to ignore it. Or maybe I don't want to ignore it. Maybe I want to do something. I don't know what to do about it, though. So yeah, we're just going to go with, if they're all correct, we'll save it. That's really simple. And my save function, so you were asking earlier about functions, Caspers?
Yeah.
So here's just an object. It's an empty object. Python is a little bit more strict about this, which is actually kind of nice. But I just created an empty object, has nothing in it. And then later on, here I assign it a function. So I'm creating a property called save, and that property save is a function, and it's receiving a blog object, which to disambiguate, normally I wouldn't do this because I'd name things better, but to disambiguate, I'm going to call this blog obj, to be clear that it's the object and not the name of the system.
Mm-hmm.
And then local storage is something that exists in the browser. So another way to call that would be window.localstorage. In fact, I'm just going to go up to the top, just to be clear here. Local storage equals window.localstorage. And I'm going to put that, where should I put that? I think I'm going to bring all those things into here, because that makes sense. So this is just kind of poor man's dependency tree, just so everybody knows what I expect to have to use in here. There we go. So window, again, window means the browser. And then local storage is a property of the window that just exists. I don't have to do anything to create it. It's just there because it's there. And it's what allows me to save stuff. So let me go back to, where was my blog model.save? There we go. And so I'm going to use local storage, and I'm going to set item, and then I'm giving it a name. So this is creating a key, what we call a key. So it's going to be blog dot, and then this is going to look like blog dot https github.com org repo. And I think actually I also want to do this. I'm going to want to do it blog obj dot branch dot get branch. Okay. So I'm going to, this is getting kind of long and difficult to read, so I'm going to call this key. I'm going to put it right there. That way we're doing fewer things at a time. And this is what it may look like that. Okay, so ask what kind of functions did you have, or questions did you have about functions? Because maybe we can just go over a little bit of that right now.
I'm gonna need to refer to my previous notes. It's been right now months since I haven't done any coding, so will take a while right now. Just to catch up, I believe we can do it.
Okay, all right,
Next.
okay. Well, do you get that a function is, you're basically saving something that you want to do. So function is kind of like a factory, like make peanut butter and jelly sandwich. So I could have a function that's make peanut butter and jelly sandwich, and inside that function I have a bunch of instructions. And it might say to call another function, which is kind of like a set of instructions saying turn to page 12. You know, how to assemble this thing. So you've got a function called assemble, and it says, if you're assembling the top half, go to page 7. If you're assembling the bottom half, go to page 12. And
Okay.
and then when you follow instructions on page 12 is its own set of instructions. And then you can give it parameters. So they're sometimes called parameters or options, but it's basically, you, on the inside, it receives something. So this function receives a blog object. And so if we go back to where I called it, I'm creating here an object. And this object has all of this stuff in it.
Mm-hmm.
And so my save function, whatever stuff it is, it just calls all the stuff that it gets blog object, and then I can access properties of it. So in this case, I've got .repo, .getBranch, etc. Any questions about that?
No.
All right, and then one thing I need to do here is I need to stringify this. And then here, this needs to actually return something, just sitting there. And this needs to parse that or an empty object. Actually, no, it doesn't need to parse anything. This one should have, let's say JSON is equal to this. And then we're going to say if we got something, then we expect that we can parse it. So I'm going to say JSON.parse. Let's do this. We're going to return null there if there's nothing. So one thing that I like to do that again, this is an expert tip that everybody should know. Everybody should be doing this, but it's often neglected to be taught, or people overlook it, or for some silly reason they choose not to do it. But whenever there is an error condition, try to consider where you can, well, any type of condition. You want to figure out if you can leave early. The purpose that you want to try to do is to end things as soon as you can. So once I know if I get from here and there's nothing else for me to do, it's not an error, just nothing exists, nothing else for me to do, then at that point I should return out. And I'm returning null to signify explicitly null means nothing. So I'm saying I'm returning nothing because I have nothing, and it's intentionally nothing.
Mm-hmm.
So here, if I got something, there's one more step I can take. So if I got nothing, the only step I can take is to return nothing. That's what I've got left. If I have something, one more step I can take is that I can parse the something that I got. And parsing will turn it from a string into an object. And the difference is almost, well, when you look at it, the difference is visually almost nothing. So here's a string. So let's say I'm just going to do two things here. We've got branch main, and we've got, oh, that should be get branch, according to the way that I'm currently calling things. And we'll say we've got get host, and get host is GitHub. So this is a string. It starts with a sort of quote on either side. And it doesn't really matter what's in the middle, except it matters that there's not another quote in the middle. If there's another quote of the same type in the middle, it breaks it. But I can escape it. And if I escape it using a backslash, that's often the escape character, then it can continue on without worrying about the fact that it encountered a quote. So that's not an error, but if I did this, that's an error. Does that make sense? Yep.
That's it.
So if I were to parse this, in this case, it's trivial because I'm already showing you exactly what we have. But if I were to parse this, I get back an object, and the object looks exactly like what the string looked like. But it is now an object that I can manipulate. And so the difference between...
I also believe Akshat has just asked you a question.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah.
Add the branch name in the key. Oh, yes. Thank you. Yeah, I will get back to that in just a second. I'll do it. He just noticed a typo that I made. So I will go fix that. I have to think about that one too. Anyway, so if I get rid of the quotes here, it just so happens that, if I had the string bananas, it doesn't mean anything to JavaScript. But in this particular instance, if I remove the quotes, having these brackets and having the double quotes, et cetera, it actually means something. So I don't have to, whoops, I wouldn't have to parse it if I didn't type it wrong in the first place. Syntax error, unexpected token. What did I do wrong? Oh, there we go. Anyway. So if I want to store this in a file, you can't store an object in a file, but you can stringify an object and store that in a file. So this I can store in a file. I can copy and paste this. Like I can literally, with my hands, copy and paste this, and I can store it in a file. An object I cannot store in a file because it is a living, breathing thing, so to speak. There's not a way for me to copy this. It's got different parts of it, but I can't copy it, if that makes sense. And so that's what the whole JSON parse and JSON stringify is about. Now this one, let's see, when I do the get here, I'm going to change this to be ID. And we're going to say this should be repo plus this plus branch. That's what that should look like. Anyway, so to go back here, that was just kind of explaining what the parse and the stringify is. And I know this is, again, drinking from a fire hose, but it's one of those things where you just get exposure to stuff and kind of learn about it in little bits and pieces. And after a while, it starts to fit together. Obviously, we want to do some intentional, ground up instruction. But just seeing code and understanding how it works and just getting a feel for it is valuable unto itself. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to flop this around to the way that I almost started to write it, because it's kind of the way that we would say it in English. I say, if I've got something, then let me parse it. Otherwise, let me do nothing. And the reason that I rearranged this is that the shortest path to get out would be to do nothing sooner. So if my option is I can do something and then be done, or I can do nothing and be done, I want to pick the path where I'm doing the fewest number of steps. Now, in this particular case, the number of steps is the difference between 0 steps and 1 step. But often you find people have code where it looks like this, where they're doing, say 10 or 20 things here, and then they do 1 or 2 things there. And this is not good code, because it will lead to more difficulty in reading the code and in updating the code to have... Basically, you want to be able to read from top to bottom, not from left to right. And so every time you use brackets, you're indenting, you are reading more from left to right. So you want to read from left to right as little as possible. It's kind of a poor moral argument to say good code versus bad code. I can go into detail more about that later. But essentially, the fewer number of operations that are reading from left to right, the worse it is. The better it is. And the more operations that are reading from top to bottom, the better it is. And of course, you do need to section things off so you don't have a million things in either direction. But you want to be more sensitive about having to read from left to right than reading from top to bottom. So anytime that you can get out of something that has brackets, you want to do it as early as you can. Does that make any sense at all, or was that just complete babble? And it's okay if it was.
Not to me though. Maybe it's Akshay to the dead. I believe he's more into programming.
Yeah. Well, you'll get there. Is when you start to write functions that are more than 5 lines long, and you start to use if else, and you've got if else that are, if you've got an if else that's 10 lines long, you probably should do something different, because it should be really, really short most of the time. There's always exceptions to every rule. Anyway, so now we've got this save going on. I think that that's about right. What I'm going to go back and do, let me go back to deserialize. What was it? Blog.serialize. Okay. One of the things that I want to do here is actually, when I'm done, one thing that I should do before I exit, which maybe is a good case for this as is, I'm going to go back to this. All right, if dirty or not branch, I'm going to call post.serialize and give it the same event. Currently, most of these inputs are listening to, they have a handler for post.serialize. These 4 I want to change to be blog.serialize so that they handle themselves in a special way. And then I want this, I want the blog.serialize to still call post.serialize, because basically when anything changes, we want to update and save everything that's in the form. And that's what post.serialize has done up to this point. At some point in the future, I may tease it out a little bit to where if it is these 4 elements, it doesn't need to call post.serialize. But for right now, it does, because the ID of the blog that the post is attached to would be changing with this as well. So I'm going to go in to this, and where I have, let's see, which things is it? Oh, and I need to get this to be, I need to get rid of these options in short order. The last thing that we're going to do with this, which I think will be the next thing that we do, is I'm going to replace these set options with dynamic options. So it's going to pull from what we have with the blogs and put that as possible values. And I'll enter in all 4 of mine. Anyway, so what are we starting with? This stuff is description. So here is about the blog system. Okay, and I'm just going to check a look over here if we got any comments. No comments right now. All right, so I'm going to, all of the on whatever post, I'm going to change to blog.serialize, which will call post.serialize. So I'm just going to look for post, whoops, just in these few things. So the repo, the branch, the blog system, and the Git host. All of those I'm going to update. And then we don't need that one. So now, if I refresh this, and, okay, we clear this out, and I'm going to close that door. My daughter's crying, but my wife's handling it. Okay, so as I click around here, hopefully nothing is broken. I really would. For those of you that are watching, if you are familiar with more of the browser side things, for me, I'm very familiar with the browser from a technical perspective, from an engineering perspective, but I'm not familiar with the frameworks and stuff. I do everything that I do in the browser by hand. Usually I'm writing libraries. If there's anything that looks pretty, I didn't do it. I grabbed something simple. This right here is mvp.css, which I highly recommend because it's just really, really simple. There's no classes or anything. It's just, it just makes things look pretty by default. You just put in a table. This is what the table looks like. No classes. This is what the table looks like. Well, I did do some stuff inside of the cells of the table, like put, obviously. Anyway, but it looks like we're clicking around. There's no problems. Let me click and see if we load. Okay, that's loading. Great. That's loading. Okay, so now, is this the real one here? I think this actually is the real one. And this one, let's just change the system. This is hosted on GitHub. Cool. So if all went well, there's a typo. There is a typo. That's interesting that didn't get caught, actually. Blog ajb. I wonder why my let me JS hint. Make sure that I have that installed, because sometimes I switch between node versions and then I forget to reinstall JS hint. So let me see. Am I gonna get an error about that now? No. Huh. I'll have to look into that later, why that didn't, because we want our tooling to catch, simple typo type errors without having to go test things. But anyway, what was I at? I was looking at, I think it was the first one. Okay, yeah. So this one, I'm just going to change something so the change event fires, which is going to cause it to save. And so now if I go look with what we just wrote, if I go look in local storage, whoops, too many extraneous things here. I should be able to find something that begins with blog. There we go. And that is it right there. So excellent. So the feature that I just created is working. Now I want to go do the reverse thing and make it so that this fills up only with suggestions that have actually been validated correctish before. So I'm going to do that. What I need is a blog model.all. Caspers, are you still there? If you've got some other stuff that you need to do, feel free to drop off if you need that. Oh, hold on just a second. Yes. Okay. All right. I'll do that in just a minute. Hey, sweetie. I'll come out in just a minute.
All right, we're gonna catch up later, all right?
Yeah. I'm gonna have to end this up in just a minute, but I'm gonna do that one thing before I do. So,
Well, you look after yourself then. Thank you.
Yeah, I'll try to catch you a little bit in a couple hours, and we'll just go over basic stuff. And we don't.
All right, no problem.
All right.
Yeah.
Adios.
Thank you. Bye.
Okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go over local storage and pull out all the keys that start with, I think maybe what I want to do is IDs. No, we'll go with this. I'm going to loop over local storage, which is a really weird thing to loop over. Let's see. And we're going to do I is less than local storage dot length. It's such a weird pattern that you end up having to do. And then what we'll do is you have to do key. I think this is how you do it. Let me go double check. So you call key to get the key of the thing that is at that index. Yeah. Which is just so incredibly weird. So let me just put this here. And I'm not using the latest like let and const and all that stuff because I don't need it in this. So if I only need it in one tiny little case, I'm just going to use var instead because then my code's consistent. And because let would be useful here, but that's the only place that it would be useful in almost all the code. So I'm not going to worry about it. Anyway, so we got key here. if key dot starts with blog, I guess really if not key starts with blog, then continue. And then if it does, then I guess we add it to the array, I think. Or maybe let's see what's the fewest things to do here. Local storage. Well, I guess this would actually be blog model.get because this will also parse it. There we are. I think that's it. I think that's the simplest thing to do. And then down here, I would just return blogs. I think that gives me blogs.all. Missing semicolon. Is it here? Where am I missing the semicolon? All right, you're really upset with me about that semicolon. Something's going on wrong. If, oh, missing, this is what it's missing, the closing paren there. Okay, cool. So I'm almost done here. And then I actually have to go, so I have less than 5 minutes. So with this blog model.all, and I'm just going to do a whip commit on this because it's not quite ready for me to put it up in a full commit. No, I am not new to Vim by any stretch of the imagination, but I don't use that. I use a very limited set of things. I memorize the smallest set of things that do everything I need. So I know I could be using like Word and Shift Word and all that, but I just kind of stick to a very few things. But if you have something specific that you see me doing that you think that I should be doing differently, by all means, let me know. But no, I've been using Vim for a decade. I just, I have a very small brain, and so I can only keep in my working memory a small number of things, and so I just focus on the things that bring what appear to me to be the most value. And so I yeah, that's all. Oh, thank you. You have a good one. Blogmodel.all. So what I'm going to do is on init, which is kind of this init here. Okay, I'm going to do this kind of, I'm going to do it not the way that I want to do it. I just need to get something out really quick. So I'm going to do this, blogmodel.all, and then I'm going to do for each. No, I'm going to do map. This is not the way that I'm ultimately going to do it, but I just need to get something done really quick within the next 2 minutes. And so we're going to do, this is HTML is equal to, we're going to take this thing, and this is blog, and what we're going to take is return blog.repo plus blog.branch, and then we're going to do a little bit worse than that. We're going to do, what is it, select. I need to go look at the HTML real quick. Oh, and I should have, I realized I could use nerd tree, but again, I often don't because it does save me time sometimes, but often I'm working on the same file and it doesn't. Anyway, but maybe I should check out Vim Tutor anyway, just to give it a refresher and see if there's something really awesome that I've been missing. Anyway, where is it? Option. It's options. Where's data list? Data list option value. Okay, cool. There we are. So what I need is option and then value equals, and then I guess I need to URI encode that. I think that's what I end up needing to do. For right now, I'm not going to worry about it because I just need to get something done literally within 2 minutes here, so I can leave. So I'm going to put that there, and then we're going to do, what is it? Pound repos dot inner HTML equals. So let's see if this worked, and then I'm just going to have to go without even committing this. So let's say I'm going to load one that doesn't have a repo selected. Let's just load this one. Okay, it's showing me all of that, but it shouldn't be. And it's because ID is not defined. All right. So let me go to blog model.get ID. Get ID, get key. Get key. That's what it is. All right, we're going to refresh this. Nope, that still didn't work. Repo of null. Okay. Did I might have something wrong here. I did the save. That's working. If not JSON, return null. Return JSON.parse. Oh, here. Yes, I need to strip out this. Replace. Well, yeah. I just need to replace blog dot. And I'm going to do that a different way later, but I just need something that works really quick right now. Okay. Yes. Okay, worked. Success. So what I now have is it's populating the data list from here, so I can go into the HTML and I can get rid of all of these options because they were just hard-coded to my specific need. I'm going to go ahead and just do a little whip. What is going on? I've got some weird special character that's in my history, and so it's coming back up. Anyway, so I've got that saved. Good enough for now. I have to go. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed it, give it a thumbs up. If you want to see more like this or follow along, there is in the doobly-doo the link to the previous 9 segments, and I will do another one probably tomorrow. This you can kind of get the deal of what. If you go to bliss.js.org, you can kind of play around with it a little bit. But what I'm making it is a front end that will work with multiple different blog systems like Hugo, etc., which typically don't have front ends, and make it so that you can directly from this edit or add a new post to your repository just by, let me just demonstrate here again. So I've got all this information filled out. I go here, make it just as easy as just I start a blog, I click create on GitHub, and then it goes and it opens it up pre-filled. All I have to do is click commit new file, and then it's going to run my build system and my blog's going to get deployed. So that's what the whole of this is. So with that, y'all have a wonderful day, night, wherever you are. Adios.